So in the pivot table analyze options, you may have noticed that in addition to calculated fields, there's also an option for calculated items. Now the difference between the two is that calculated fields are built on numerical variables, while calculated items are built on non-numerical dimensions or categories. So in a nutshell, calculated items allow you to create new dimensions or categories using formulas built on existing dimensions or categories. So for instance, if you have movie ratings like G, PG, PG-13, and R, and you want to create a new category called Kids, which is equal to all of the G ratings combined with the PG rating data, you can do that using calculated items. Now, pro tip, big, bold, red text here, don't use calculated items unless you absolutely need to. I'm going to be honest, I am not a fan of calculated items at all. They're finicky, they're dangerous. In many cases, they're not the most efficient way to accomplish simple tasks. 99.9% of the time, you're better off simply using the grouping tools that we've already talked about or adding new categories or columns within your source data itself when you're trying to answer questions like this. Honestly, the only reason I'm even including this is just for the sake of being comprehensive and letting you know that this option does exist, but please be cautious when you do use these. So let me show you an example and kind of walk through why I'm not a fan of using calculated items. So here in our pivot, we're going to follow the same demo that I just showed you in the screenshot on the slide. We're going to take the movie ratings and we're going to try to group the G and PG data together into a new calculated item called Kids. So to do that, I need to get rid of some of these fields. I only need one instance of revenue here. I'm going to change the summarization to a sum and format it as currency. I don't need title level data, so I can pull title back out. And that should just about give me my starting point. So I've got my gross revenue rolled up by ratings with G, PG, PG-13, and R. Now to insert a calculated field, you need to select one of the values within a non-numerical dimension, so either your row labels or your column labels. In this case, my ratings are my row labels. And then once you do that, you can go into Pivot Table Tools, Fields, Items, and Sets, and this Calculated Item option will be available to you. Now here's the thing, when I press it, I get this error which says the report field is grouped, you can't add a calculated item to a grouped field, blah blah blah, ungroup button. Okay, so this is the first reason why I don't like calculated items. They're totally buggy. They only work about half the time that I want them to, and it's telling me that this rating field is grouped, but realistically it's not grouped at all. It's filtered, but it's not grouped. The problem that it has with my pivot table is actually with the release date. So if I just pull release date in and rating out, and I ungroup that release date field and pull it back out of the pivot, we can go ahead and drop rating back in. And now keep in mind we're looking at all dates, not just the years that we were filtered on before. And now if I go into Pivot Table Tools, Fields, Items, and Sets, now I can access these calculated item options. So a little bit annoying, especially because the date grouping really was unrelated to my ratings. So I should have been able to create a calculated item on this field, but for some reason Excel didn't like that. So it is what it is. Here we are in the calculated item dialog box. Like we talked about, I'm going to name this item Kids, and you can see that it's selected the rating field and listed out the items contained within that field. So the Kids rating is going to equal rating of G. And note how I can just double click just like I did with my calculated field formulas, plus the rating of PG. So simple as that, G plus PG equals Kids, and press OK. So it's actually inserted a new row or line item for Kids. But do you see why this is kind of a dangerous thing to do? That Kids total of 48.273 billion is correct. It does equal the revenue from G plus PG combined, but the fact that it added it as a new row label means that now I'm double counting both of these revenue totals, and it's producing a grand total number that's completely inaccurate. So this is fine if you're extremely cautious about it and you recognize that this line item is not independent from the line items above it. But honestly, you're just asking for trouble as soon as you start mixing in calculated items with non-calculated items. So like we talked about, what I'd actually recommend doing here is let's go ahead and go back into our calculated items, and we can select this kids item. Let's delete it and press OK. Now our grand total returns to normal, 183.8 billion, and we can accomplish the exact same thing that we just did using grouping. So I can just select G and PG, choose group, and give that group a name called kids. And then in the design options, if we want to show subtotals, there you go. There's your kids total, which is calculated as G plus PG. And there's PG-13 and R. And I've basically accomplished the exact same thing without messing with my actual raw data or skewing my grand totals. So there you have it. That's kind of the quick case study on calculated items and why I hate them. But that said, I'm sure there are some more valuable applications. Just word of warning, use them at your own risk.